Yugoslavia, an in-depth review of the years between 1945 and 1961 by Vida Belavskaya and Katrina Liu.
Between the years of 1945 and 1961, Yugoslavia overcame the economic consequences of World War II. Internal disagreements over communist righteousness and the crushing pressures of external superpowers. Under Josip Broz Tito's leadership, the country advanced its self-determination by promoting nationalism, achieving political independence, and allowing for economic autonomy. By resisting Soviet influence, encouraging socialism through workers' self-management, and joining the non-aligned movement, Yugoslavia was able to successfully gain independence from the Cold War blocs and maintain a position of political sovereignty. Stalin's demands for Yugoslavia to align with Moscow and his criticism letters ultimately pushed the country away from the Soviets. During and after World War II, Yugoslavia received little Soviet support and faced espionage. In 1950, reforms like the Basic Law of Management of State Economic Enterprises reflected Yugoslavia's drive for self-determination. These reforms focused on cutting down bureaucracy, decentralizing power, increasing democracy, and empowering workers through councils. They rejected the Soviet model of centralization. Yugoslavia aimed for citizen involvement and independence to build a safer and better government. These reforms focused on cutting down bureaucracy, decentralizing power, increasing democracy, and empowering workers through councils. They rejected the Soviet model of centralization. Yugoslavia aimed for citizen involvement and independence to build a safer and better government.
During World War II, Yugoslavia was freed from German occupation by Tito and his communist-led partisans. The war weakened control of the European powers, which led to countries in places like Yugoslavia to move towards independence. Yugoslavia resisted imperialism, aka the Nazis, through rebel movements such as the Partisans. As a socialist practicing, communist-aiming nation, Yugoslavia positioned itself as anti-colonialism. In 1941, Yugoslavia joined the Axis powers during World War II. So the Axis powers partitioned Yugoslavia, which increased the tensions between ethnic groups. In 1942, as a result of this, there was a huge Hungarian retaliation, which killed 2,500 Serbs and 600 Jewish people. After Romania withdrew from the Axis powers, Hitler lost control of the Balkans during that same year. Yugoslavia began to take steps towards annexation. In 1945, when Austrian troops finally withdrew, Yugoslavia officially annexed from the Axis powers and formed the FPRY. The FPRY, established under the rule of Josip Broz Tito. At this time, Yugoslavia had very close ties to the USSR. This was in 1945. In 1947, the Bled Agreement with Bulgaria and the Trade Agreement with Bulgaria were established. This ensured a very strong foundational relationship between Yugoslavia and its neighboring Balkan countries. The Bled Agreement with Bulgaria ensured mutual constitution, which allowed for the two nations to coexist as part of the Balkan Federation. The trade agreement with Albania required 50 million dinars worth of goods to be transported between countries without tax. In 1948, the tensions between Stalin and Tito boiled over, which resulting in the Tito-Stalin split. This newfound annexation from the Eastern Bloc allowed for a position of neutrality for Yugoslavia. The Tito-Stalin split resulted in tensions between the USSR and Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was much more closely aligned with the Western powers, aka the US, and really benefited from their trade, which bolstered the Yugoslavian economy, right? But then this all changed in 1953 when Stalin died. As a result of Stalin's death, in 1955, as a result also of Khrushchev's de-Stalinization policies, the Belgrade Declaration, which was a series of visits held between Khrushchev and Tito, was established. Now, what the Belgrade Declaration was just this statement put out to the public about every nation's right to pursue their own form of communism. And through this series of talks and visits that Khrushchev and Tito paid to their respective nations, the USSR-Yugoslavian relationship began to be repaired. Because of this unique position, in 1961, Yugoslavia actually hosts the first non-aligned conference in Belgrade. Now, they're a pretty heavy hitter at this conference. They're one of the leading founding members.
Josip Broz Tito was a Yugoslav communist leader born in 1892. Before he took control over Yugoslavia, he organized communist activities and was sentenced to prison for 5 years. During World War II, he led the Yugoslav partisans against Axis forces, which then he became the leader of the new Socialist Republic. He served as premier from 1945 to 1953 and as president of Yugoslavia from 1953 to 1980. Then there was the Tito-Stalin split in 1948, where Tito broke off with Stalin, leading to Yugoslavia building up a military with Western support for independence instead of depending on the Soviet Union. He introduced the workers' self-management in production in 1950, which the workers collectively managed production and made decisions. This was different from the Soviet style where the government had controlled everything. This initiative aimed for the Third World to pursue independence and self-determination free from the Cold War blocs. Milovan Djilas was a political writer and former Yugoslav communist official. He played a huge role in the partisan resistance to the Germans in World War II, and was also one of the leading cabinet ministers of Tito, who actively participated in the Yugoslav communist assertion of their independence from the Soviet Union in 1948. Over time, Djilas became disillusioned with communism in Yugoslavia, which led him to publishing his book, The New Class, in 1957. This spoke critically of Yugoslav socialism. He was arrested and imprisoned for opposing Yugoslavia's royalist dictatorship. There were three major themes that were connected to self-determination in Yugoslavia. The first is nationalism. After World War II, Yugoslavia broke away from Soviet control to establish itself as an independent communist nation. While they're committed to socialism, they rejected Stalin's totalitarian control and instead embraced a decentralized form of communism that allowed for more regional autonomy. The government aimed to suppress nationalism and prevent divisions among ethnic groups, focusing on promoting unity across the country. The second theme is political independence and the non-aligned movement. After World War II, the world was divided into the Eastern and Western blocs of capitalism and communism. Yugoslavia resisted Soviet pressure and targeted the Cominform sympathizers, which was an organization of communist parties. They were accused of leaning towards capitalism, and so they were expelled from the Cominform. In response, they helped create the non-aligned movement, which built an alliance with the Third World countries that wanted to remain independent from both the capitalist and communist blocs. The third theme is economic independence. Yugoslavia adopted self-management by encouraging widespread participation in economic and social decision-making processes. They promoted daily involvement of the working masses in political and economic decisions and reduced Soviet economic dominance. They interpreted Marxism in a way that aligned with their country's traditions, creating a more stable economic system.
How does this connect to the Cold War? Yugoslavia originally had ties to the Soviet Union based on the shared goal of communism. However, when Yugoslavia continued to pursue independent governing, the Tito-Stalin relationship fizzled out, and Yugoslavia found itself more closely aligned with Western powers. After Stalin's death, and as a result of Khrushchev's de-Stalinization efforts, the relationship between the USSR and Yugoslavia was rekindled, namely as a result of the Belgrade Declaration, which can be seen in the picture on the left. This happened in 1955, and Tito maintained trade relationships with both the US and USSR and frequently collaborated with surrounding Baltic nations after. Yugoslavia was also one of the founding members of the non-aligned movement as a result of its unique position and collaboration with both other nations. As one of the founding members of the non-aligned movement, Tito was deeply involved in the global initiatives that took place alongside the Cold War. We are not trying to find any special new road, but are taking strict account of the questions which are imposed upon us on our everyday lives. Tito, on socialism. Despite its successes on the global stage, Yugoslavia also faced some internal issues. Namely, worker self-management comes to mind. Worker self-management emerged as an effort to combat the economic consequences of World War II as well as to resist nationalist tendencies. It was established based on the principle that state-owned enterprises should be managed by the producers that contribute to said enterprises. Self-management got the economy back on its feet and successfully integrated into the cultural zeitgeist. It established a cultural norm for the Yugoslavian people and promoted democracy in the political sphere. However, many people took issue with self-governance, as it wasn't considered to be pure communism with its push for decentralization. It was difficult to get off of its feet initially, and the resulting market forces caused a large disparity in labor reimbursement. It also had some consequences to it, mostly positive, but anyways. It led to extreme developments in Yugoslavian governance. Two extremes were formed, one that was pro-self-management, one that was opposed. Yugoslavian politics, as a result, began to resemble Western multi-party systems, and Yugoslavia overall became a lot more liberal-leaning. Generally, it was very successful for all of Tito's rule. It established a new lifestyle and governance for the Yugoslav people. It had a very good constitutional framework set up. There are also quite a few consequences as a result of worker self-management. They led to developments in governance. Two extremes were formed, one that was pro self-management and one that was opposed. And with their internal conflicts through the system of parliament, Yugoslavian politics began to resemble the Western multi party system and became a lot more liberal leaning. As part of the analysis, it was pretty successful for all of Tito's rule. It established a new lifestyle and system of governance, promoted democracy, and it had a very good constitutional framework. In conclusion, it's easy to see how Yugoslavia was able to successfully advance the cause of socialism while retaining an independent position on the global stage. By maintaining a non aligned geopolitical agenda, Yugoslavia was able to remain nationally competent, achieve political independence, and create opportunities for economic self determination. By overcoming the various internal and external conflicts, Yugoslavia was able to establish sovereignty in an ever changing political climate.